Welcome to Shujin Academy VGM Club. I'm Professor Tom, your faculty sponsor. Near the beginning of my last semester of college, I started dating a girl. She had an old, long-haired orange tabby cat named Alice. The cat would only drink out of the faucet in her studio apartment, so the faucet was left at a trickle all the time. As time went on, the girl and I progressed in our relationship, and when we moved in together, Alice became my stepcat. Alice was old and floofy and halfway blind, and she had no teeth. She got around the house at night by meowing a lot and using echolocation to figure out where she was, and once she'd gotten her bearings, she'd come curl up in bed with us. The girl and I liked living together so much that we got married, and a few months after our wedding, we had to have Alice put to sleep. She was a very good cat, and she lived a nice long life. Today's opening track is Welcome to Wonderland from Kingdom Hearts for the PlayStation 2, composed by Yoko Shimomura, and it was chosen specifically because Alice the cat was named after Alice the girl from Alice in Wonderland. This episode is going to be a little different. I've had the idea for this episode for a long time. It's a lot more personal than normal, and I'm going to talk a lot more than normal, because this is an episode devoted to the 4 cats I've had in my adult life. To begin, there's some Professor Tom history. Nearly a year after our wedding, and several months after Alice passed away, my wife decided she was ready to take on another animal, and we had a friend with parents who'd found a stray cat with a newly born litter, so we brought home the tiniest little gray tabby kitten. I decided that we should start a family tradition of naming all of our animals after fighting game characters, and I was playing a lot of Capcom vs. SNK 2 at the time, so we named our kitten Athena, after Athena Asamiya, SNK's fighting psychic pop idol and one of my CVS2 go-to characters. Athena the kitten was so little that we had to feed her kitten milk for the first week or 2 we had her, but eventually she weaned herself and set about doing adorable cat things. One of my favorite memories of little kitten Athena is a time when I was pulling all the meat off a whole chicken I'd cooked, and she climbed me like a tree, eventually perching on one of my shoulders hoping to get a few snitches. She was the first animal in my life that was mine, even if she did come to prefer my wife over me. Athena grew up into a very pretty cat, and she was quite fond of sitting on your lap and getting attention. To this day, I think she's the best lap cat I've ever had. We bought her some little toy mice that were laced with catnip, and she didn't really care about the catnip, but she enjoyed the mice quite a bit, and she taught us to play fetch with her. Here's how that worked. Athena would bring you the toy mouse, and then she'd look at you and meow until you threw it for her. Then she'd scramble after it, grab it, and bring it back to you for another round, much like you'd expect from a dog playing fetch. But Athena was quite feline, so if you didn't throw the mouse far enough the first time, she'd drop it a few steps away from you so that you had to throw it farther. She liked this game so much that when I set up a room so that I could work from home, I actually put my desk facing the door so that when Athena brought me a mouse, I could throw it out the door and down the hallway for her to chase. Here's another Athena story. At one point, my wife and I lived in an old farmhouse that included a finished attic and an attic fan that was hung horizontally. The attic fan didn't have a grate covering it, which was a bit of a safety hazard, but my wife and I didn't think much of it since there weren't any children around. But one day we were running the attic fan, and Athena got curious about it, and she jumped up into it to check things out. Luckily, she only got a glancing blow from it, which gave her some minor cuts to the face, but my wife and I were freaked out, and Athena learned her lesson and never investigated the attic fan again. Like a lot of cats, Athena developed issues with her kidneys, and she got sick and died in 2018. She was a good cat, and she was the first animal I'd had in my adult life. But Athena isn't the only cat I've had. For this episode of the show, I thought I'd pay a tiny little tribute to my cats by playing a bunch of songs from the various games we used to name them. In the case of Athena, there are quite a few musical choices. I think the best starting point is the 1986 arcade game Athena, which is sort of the genesis of the character, even if that game's Princess Athena is actually an ancestor of everyone's favorite fighting game pop idol. The Athena Asamiya incarnation of the character actually debuted in 1987 in Psycho Soldier, a pseudo-sequel to the original Athena that featured the very innovative gimmick of having a theme song with vocals, and then SNK filed her away in a drawer somewhere in their Osaka headquarters and didn't think about her again until they decided to make a crazy fighting game crossover with characters from all of their franchises. Athena and her Psycho Soldier companion C. Kinsu joined the roster of King of Fighters 94 alongside their mentor Chen, who's an elderly kung fu master. Athena Asamiya has proven to be quite popular. She's been a part of the roster in every single mainline King of Fighters game, and she's typically sporting a different outfit each time, befitting her pop idol nature. We'll spend our first music block going through a few of the games from Athena's illustrious career, starting out with World of Ice from her first appearance in the arcade game Athena, composed by someone who was working for SNK in the mid-80s. I couldn't actually find proper credits for this game. That said, I did find proper credits for the second song, which is Theme Athenacchi from Athena, Awakening from the Ordinary Life, the PlayStation adventure game starring an alternate universe version of Athena in the then-future year of 2018, who discovers that she has psychic powers. It was composed by KIKU. Our third song takes us to the King of Fighters franchise with Will, the theme of Athena's team from King of Fighters 2000 for the Neo Geo. It was composed by Hideki Asanaka, Hiroshi Yamazoe, and Yasuo Yamate. Because this is a fairly personal episode, I'm also going to play Happiness from Capcom vs. SNK 2 in this block, since that's the game that introduced me to the character and the game that inspired me to name that cute little kitten all those years ago. The composer there is Satoshi Issei. We'll then head back to the King of Fighters games with Pure, At Good Old Days, which is the song of Athena's team from King of Fighters 11, which was released on the Atomiswave arcade platform, marking the first time a KOF sequel hadn't shown up on the Neo Geo, and composed by the team of Hideki Asanaka, Marimo, and USAKO-X. And there's one more song. In case you didn't know, Athena Asamiya has her very own theme song. It's called Psycho Soldier, and it's been in several games, starting out as the theme song for her appearance in the arcade game Psycho Soldier with some very compressed vocals that were top of the line in 1987, but which are much less impressive today. I couldn't do a block of Athena songs without playing some form of it, so I'm going with Psycho Soldier Remix 96 from the King of Fighters 96 Arrange Sound Trax album. This version has much higher production values than the 1987 original, so it's a good way to enjoy Athena's signature song. Composition for this one is credited to SNK's Shinsekai Gakkyoku Zatsugidan sound team, with vocals from Tamao Sato, one of Athena's multiple voice actors. Athena, ikimasu! Those songs were World of Ice from the arcade version of Athena, theme Athenacchi from Athena Awakening from the Ordinary Life, Will from King of Fighters 2000, Happiness from Capcom vs. SNK 2, Pure at Good Old Days from King of Fighters 11, and finally, Psycho Soldier REMIX’96 from the arranged soundtrack for King of Fighters 96. About a year after we got Athena, my wife and I had done some talking about getting an additional cat. We'd taken on our friend John as a roommate for a while. You might recognize him from his appearance on a bonus episode of the show back in November of 2022. John and his cat had just moved out, so there was just little Athena in the house all day, every day, all by herself, and we thought she might be lonely. And then John came over to our house for Friend Christmas. The way John tells it, he opened the door to his apartment, gifts in hand, ready to come deliver some presents to us, and there was a little kitten just staring up at him, saying, "Hey, I'm ready to go." The little kitten was obviously a stray, and John didn't have the capacity to take on an extra cat, so he put the kitten in a carrier and brought her to our house as an extra Christmas gift. I took one look at the kitten and I said, "Oh no, John, no," because I knew as soon as I saw her, we were going to be keeping her. She had cute little white front paws and cute little white back legs and a white chest, and we named her after Sakura, the Japanese schoolgirl character from the Street Fighter series. But we pronounced it Sakura because neither me nor my wife speak Japanese. I could tell you that Sakura and Athena fell in love and became best friends, and you probably wouldn't know better unless you're part of the 60% of my listener base that knows me in real life. However, the two kittens were not fast friends, although they did eventually work out a peace treaty, and so we came to have a pair of cats instead of just one cat. Sakura developed some autoimmune issues, and we wound up putting her on steroid pills to deal with them, which meant that my wife got the thankless job of giving her pills on a regular basis. As a result of all the steroids, Sakura also got to be quite overweight. At her heaviest, she was probably about twice the weight she should have been carrying on her petite frame. My sister called Sakura a meatball on stilts, and that was a fairly apt description. Between our two cats, Athena definitely assumed the dominant position. Sakura would generally give Athena a pretty wide berth around the house. But there was a notable exception. When it was feeding time, Sakura was always the first one to the food bowl, and she'd eat her fill while Athena watched. Sakura absolutely hated to be picked up or held. If you tried to pick her up, she'd turn into a frenzy of teeth and claws, kind of like a one-cat version of that cartoon trope where some characters get into a fight that's a big dust cloud with various limbs that jut out wildly. Trying to hold her down to get her nails trimmed was such a struggle that we eventually gave up on doing it ourselves and started taking her to the veterinarian, who would be forced to sedate her in order to get that job done. After my wife and I moved into our current house, Athena and Sakura split it up, and Sakura spent most of her time in the sunroom enjoying the windows. They were mostly inside cats, but we did let them out once in a while, and on one of these occasions, Sakura just wandered off and decamped herself under our backyard shed for a few days. Eventually, she came back, and my wife and I liked to joke that Sakura had a romantic weekend fling with the groundhog that had taken up permanent residence beneath the shed. Once Athena died, Sakura became an only cat. She mostly ignored our children, who were children and therefore loud and rambunctious, and our attempts to convince her to be a lap cat failed, as she refused to be picked up and she was so fat that jumping onto our couch was prohibitively difficult for her. But she did like to curl up in our bed and sleep with us, and she took advantage of the cat steps we put by the bed to get up there and lounge quite often. When I shower in the morning, Sakura would generally walk in and lap up the various droplets that remained on the tile floor. She'd decided that shower water was the best water, and she had a clear preference for it over what we put in her bowl. She had a purr like a jet engine. It was so loud you could hear her from several feet away, and I'd often lay in bed at night with Sakura planted between my knees, listening to her little rumble. Eventually, we welcomed some other cats into the house, and Sakura did learn to tolerate them, but we'll talk more about that in the next segment. Sakura got old and arthritic. She got to the point where she rarely left our bedroom of her own volition. My wife and I actually moved a litter box and some bowls of food and water into our room just to accommodate her. We got our crotchety old kitten a ramp so that she could make it onto our bed, and she split her time between the bed and the floor of our bedroom closet, where she had a quilt she liked to lay on. Her health continued to decline through all of 2025, and she lost so much weight that you could feel her bones when you pet her. She got sick near the end of August, and we knew she wasn't going to be with us much longer. In September, she got so bad my wife and I knew it was time to put her to sleep. So we made an appointment with the vet, and my wife and I took the day off work just to be with her. We knew she was feeling bad because we could pick her up and carry her around, which was at one point unthinkable. Sakura didn't make it to the vet appointment. She died cradled up in bed with my wife and I, falling asleep one final time. We buried her in the front yard, not far from where we'd buried Athena several years earlier, and her passing was the event that motivated me to get up and make this episode. Now it's time to play some Sakura songs. Introduced in 1996's Street Fighter Alpha 2, Sakura Kasugano is a Japanese schoolgirl who became obsessed with franchise protagonist Ryu and left her normal life to pursue him on the path of the warrior, using a self-taught version of Ryu's signature techniques. She wears a typical Sailor Fuku school uniform, complemented with a headband and a pair of tennis shoes, and the concept of a fighting Japanese schoolgirl became so popular that Sakura was included in a host of subsequent games in the Street Fighter orbit, including the Street Fighter EX games, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, and the Marvel vs. Capcom games. When it came time for Capcom to resurrect the Street Fighter franchise in 2008 with Street Fighter 4, Sakura was chosen as a member of the initial roster. She's an adorable character, with the juxtaposition of youthful innocence and badass warrior making a great impression. I'm going to play 4 Sakura songs in this next music block. We'll start things off with I Want You to Know, which is a vocal arrangement of Sakura's theme from her first appearance in Street Fighter Alpha 2. Lyrics and composition here are from Tatsuro Suzuki, with vocals by Sakura's original voice actor Yuko Sasamoto. It's such an adorable song. It's funny because determining the original source of this song is a bit of a challenge. I think its first appearance is from the PlayStation and Saturn ports of Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo. It also shows up on the Dreamcast and Game Boy Advance ports of Puzzle Fighter, although the GBA version is compressed to hell so it doesn't sound particularly good. That'll be followed by Sakura's Street Fighter Alpha 3 theme, which is called Breeze, and which was composed by Yuki Iwai, who did a lot of soundtracks for Capcom before moving on to freelance work, and who should not be confused for fellow Capcom composer Takayuki Iwai, who is her husband. I think it's cool how Yuki Iwai's work on the Alpha 3 soundtrack, and also the Street Fighter 3 soundtrack, broke away from previous franchise entries and gave each game its own sonic identity. For the third song, it'll be Theme of Sakura, Street Fighter 4 Arrange, from Street Fighter 4 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, arranged by Hideyuki Fukusawa, based on Tatsuro Suzuki's original song from Alpha 2. Fukusawa stuck with rearranging a lot of the classic Street Fighter songs for the Street Fighter 4 soundtrack, but he did create new songs for the individual stages, which were typically only lightly tethered to specific characters. I like Fukusawa's decision to go with classic themes for Street Fighter 4, which might feel like a contradiction of what I just said about the soundtracks for Street Fighter 3 and Alpha 3. But there's a big difference. Street Fighter 3 and Alpha 3 were the 11th and 15th Street Fighter games released between 1991 and 1998, but when Street Fighter 4 dropped in 2008, it was the first Street Fighter game in years, so nostalgia was a valid choice. To close out the block, we'll hear Precious Heart, which is Sakura's theme from the Street Fighter EX spin-off series. The version we'll be hearing is from PlayStation 2 launch title Street Fighter EX 3, although it was also used for Sakura's first EX series appearance in Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha for the PS1. I'm just using the PS2 version of the song because I think it sounds a little better. The song was composed by Takayuki Aihara for Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha and brought back for EX3, presumably also under the supervision of Aihara. This is a great soaring track, led by electric guitar, that has a youthful, upbeat feeling, and I wish it would see some attention in modern Street Fighter games, although I suspect that it's in some form of copyright hell due to the fact that the EX series was developed separately from the rest of the Street Fighter games, and the soundtrack rights are thusly ensnared.
こんなとこだね。
Those songs were I Want You to Know, a vocal arrangement of Sakura's theme from Street Fighter Alpha 2, Breeze from the arcade release of Street Fighter Alpha 3, theme of Sakura, Street Fighter 4 arrange from Street Fighter 4, and Precious Heart, Sakura's theme from Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha and Street Fighter EX 3. At the beginning of 2021, Sakura had settled into life as an only cat, and she seemed quite interested in living out her twilight years as an only cat, free from other feline interference. Unfortunately for her, she didn't make the decisions, and one of our friends on Facebook knew of a stray cat that had just birthed a litter of cute, long-haired gray tabby kittens. After some internal familial discussion, and also some lobbying from my wife and my daughter, we took in one of the kittens. I wanted to continue the long-established but infrequently used tradition of naming cats after fighting game characters, but my children had other ideas. We eventually reached a détente, and the compromise was that we would name the kitten Blaze after the female lead in the Streets of Rage games. I'd been playing a ton of Streets of Rage 4 at the time, and I'd roped the rest of the family into some together time doing 4-player co-op, which is an impressive feat as my wife and daughter aren't typically into beat-em-ups. Blaze was a feisty little kitten, and while we loved having her in the family, Sakura was nonplussed, and she did not want to play with the new kitten. The answer, of course, was that we needed to get a kitten for our kitten, and so we all packed up and went to the animal shelter, where they brought us a little friendly black short-haired cat that immediately showered us with affection. The little black kitten came home with us, and we named her Cherry, after another Streets of Rage 4 character who's a punk rock girl with an electric guitar. In the years since we brought them home, they've grown into a mostly friendly pair, with some occasional wrestling matches that get out of hand. Blaze never really did make friends with Sakura, although Cherry did eventually get to the point where she was tolerated. Not liked, but at least tolerated. Blaze is a very floofy cat. Her long hair is extremely soft, and it turns into knots in her armpits, which my wife tries to cut out, and then Blaze tries to dodge her, and then my wife gets out these wet cat food treat things that come in a tube, and Blaze goes om nom 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 and licks the tube as my wife tries to cut the knots out. Pro-life tip for those of you with floofy cats, an envelope slitter is a decent way to cut the knots off your feline friend. When it's human mealtime, Blaze is the food inspector. She'll come up to the table and insist that she be allowed to examine whatever you're eating. She doesn't try to eat it, she just sniffs your food to make sure it's okay. Sometimes on weekend mornings, when I'm done drinking my coffee, she'll stick her head in my empty coffee cup and lick it all over, which is always surprising since I drink my coffee black. Blaze's favorite toy is her snake. It's not actually a toy snake, it's just the belt from my son's bathrobe, and Blaze stole it long ago and carries it around the house with her. Sometimes she'll catch it and then sit and loudly meow for several minutes until you find the source of all the yowling, and you tell her that she's a very good huntress who's kept all of us safe from the evil snake. She loves high places, too. My bedroom closet has a set of shelves that are quite high off the ground, and it's not unusual to see Blaze sitting on a high shelf, lounging on some towels or blankets, quite proud of herself. And there's one other thing she does. When someone is upset, like angry or crying, Blaze will come up to them and try to comfort them. She doesn't really know how, so she just sits there and does a bunch of adorable concerned meows, which sometimes does help a little. As for Cherry, she's the snuggly cat. She likes to be held more than any cat I've ever had. It's not unusual for Cherry to jump from the ground onto the middle of your back and then experience her climbing onto your shoulder because apparently she was a parrot in a previous life. On many mornings, my wife will get out of the shower to find Cherry waiting patiently, at which point my wife will drape a towel over her shoulder and carry Cherry around like a princess on a palanquin. And for those of you who just learned a vocabulary word there, a palanquin is one of those thrones with sticks through the base that a noble sits on while 4 or more attendants carry them around. I generally try to sleep in on most weekend mornings, and Cherry will interrupt this by coming into bed and kneading my pillow or even my face until I finally acquiesce to her demands and feed her some cat treats as tribute. Cherry often comes and visits me at the office, too. I work from home, and Cherry will pop her cute little self through the door and hop onto my desk, where she'll insist on being between me and my keyboard until I've finally had enough and I throw her out and shut the door so I can actually get something done. She does this adorable thing when she wants your attention, where she'll flop down in a sideways somersault thing, and then she'll lay on her side and stretch herself out, and I always have to stop and look at it, and appreciate how pretty she is. Which is funny, because she's not a photogenic cat at all. In pictures, she typically just shows up as a big black blob with eyes and a tail, although that might be a comment on my lacking photography skills instead of my subject. She loves to sit in laps. My wife has the favorite lap, but occasionally Cherry will deign to sit on my lap, or my son's lap, and when that happens, we all know that we're just stuck until our little princess decides to get up. I guess I should play some music now, since this episode is running quite long. And because my youngest cats are named after characters from Streets of Rage, I suppose I'll just have to play a big block of music from those games. You've definitely never heard anything from the Streets of Rage series on my show before, except for, the 9 other episodes where I've played songs from the franchise. What do we have up for this round? Well, I'm going to start things off with 3 songs from series revival Streets of Rage 4, since it's the game that inspired us to name the cats. First, it'll be Character Select from franchise composer Yuzo Koshiro, and then we'll hear It's Extra from Motohiro Kawashima, the other veteran composer for the series. And then it'll be Funky HQ, which was composed by Olivier Deriviere, who did multiple songs for this soundtrack and who acquitted himself quite well. Deriviere is actually an industry veteran who's adept at a number of styles. His soundtrack for South of Midnight came out this year and has some very interesting stuff on it that sounds nothing like what he did for this game. I guess I'm kind of going through the series backwards, because the penultimate song in the block is Under Logic from Streets of Rage 2, and to finish things up, we'll leave our kittens in a happy place with Good Ending from the original Streets of Rage. Those songs were Character Select, It's Extra, and Funky HQ, all from Streets of Rage 4, Under Logic from Streets of Rage 2, and Good Ending from the original Streets of Rage. That is the show. If you want to reach me, I'm most active on Blue Sky as shujinacademy.bsky.social. You can also find me on Threads, Facebook, and Instagram as Shujin Academy VGM Club. Episodes of the show are posted to my YouTube channel, which you can find by searching for Shujin Academy VGM Club. Other links are on my Linktree at linktr.ee/Shujin Academy. Please leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're finding this episode. New episodes are released once or twice a month, depending on how often I get them done, and they premiere on Thursday mornings on your favorite podcatcher and on 8beats.co, the internet's #1 game music radio station. My show is also featured on TerraPlayer, the cool app that's a destination for gaming podcasts and other content, so you can check me out there. Finally, if you just can't get enough of me, I also voice esports reporter Samson Escapades on audio drama How Much in Bison Dollars, which you can find on FGC Radio and RSS.com. If you're listening on Spotify, please be aware that they've pulled a few of my episodes before. There's a non-zero chance that they'll eventually pull my entire podcast, as they've done with a few other game music podcasts, so I'd strongly suggest you subscribe elsewhere to be sure you can get all the Professor Tom goodness you crave. Special thanks for this episode goes out to fellow VGM podcaster Jameson of Bar Silence Podcast for contributing cover art. You can and should find Bar Silence wherever you download podcasts, and check out his website at barsilence.com. I've got one more song to play us out. Given that I wanted to name my cats after fighting game characters, and that all of the cats I've had were female, you'd think that I would have tried to get one of them named after Felicia, the adorable cat girl from the Darkstalkers games, who's probably about the most morally upstanding character in that particular franchise. Of the various themes attached to Felicia, my favorite is her theme from the arcade version of Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, Capcom's crossover puzzle/fighting game, so that's what we'll play out with. The credits for the Puzzle Fighter soundtrack claim that this is an arrangement of Felicia's theme from the original Darkstalkers, but I do not hear that at all. Anyway, composition credits for this go out to some combination of Takayuki Iwai, Hideki Okugawa, Tatsuro Suzuki, Isao Abe, Yuko Takehara, Sion Nishigaki, and Setsuo Yamamoto. Thank you for listening. I'm Professor Tom, and I'll see you next time on Shujin Academy VGM Club.